What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Chop and Brew. This is a really cool episode coming up. It's basically kind of a virtual tasting panel discussion with two of the guys from Falling Knife Brewing Company. We're talking to Tom Berg, who is the Chief Brewing Officer, and Robbie Denaway, who is the head brewer at Falling Knife. So me, Leaf, Brian, and then Robbie and Tom, we're going to sit down in our own places, and we're going to drink through an awesome India Pale Lager and a fruited sour beer that they have. We're going to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of both of those beers, but also kind of the reality of running their very new brewery at this time, at this place and time in 2020. We're also going to talk about homebrewing roots. We're going to talk about homebrewing techniques to mirror some of the beers that they're doing, and just have a really good time talking about how these two got to the point where they are. They've both gone through a lot of home brewing. They've gone through a lot of badass pro breweries. And it's just a good discussion, nice hour-long discussion about all things beer, home brewing, Falling Knife. I want to give a shout out to Brewer Supply Group, BSG, and Imperial Yeast, both for keeping the malts, hops, and yeast flowing in these important times to keep the beer going out to the people, and for the support of Chop and Brew, this here show. Also support of the Patreon. Join them at patreon.com/chopandbrew. We're doing what we can do to keep information flowing out to everybody and inspire and motivate you in these times where home brewing and beer is ever so important. So stick around, grab a couple of pints, and see what's going on with the guys at Falling Knife Brewing Company in Minneapolis. Let's do it. Cheers up. Woo! Cheers, everybody. Cheers. Welcome to Chop and Brew, real world, virtual world. We are in a Zoom chat room with two brewers of Falling Knife Brewing Company in Minneapolis. I'm Chip Walton. We got badass Brian Adams. We got Leaf, Tom, and Robbie. Welcome to the show.
What's up, guys?
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
I'm
for
just glad we're drinking.
Yeah.
First beer of the day.
I've been waiting.
So
Same.
Yeah.
So real quick, what's going on here is Falling Knife is doing beer delivery. So within like 10 or 12 miles of the brewery. So all of us have, three of us have ordered the beer, and then two of us brought it home free from work. And now we're going to drink some and talk about an Imperial Lager, an IPL. And what is FWB? What do you categorize that as?
Fruited sour, kettle sour. We're not necessarily calling it Berliner Weiss. We're just fruited sour is kind of what we've been calling it.
Cool. Well, the first beer up, we're drinking a beer called Neon Midnight Imperial Pale Lager. Correct, Tom?
India Pale Lager.
India. What did I say?
Imperial.
I was wishful thinking, baby. Wishful thinking. So tell us about it. Tell us about it, and in the process, kind of like tell us about yourself and your home brewing roots, and now your pro brewing expertise.
Well, I started homebrewing probably close to 15 years ago, and started with the kits, then upgraded to the cooler. Did that for a number of years. Once I started hitting all grain, man, it was like game on. You know how it goes. And then I installed basically a nano brewery in my basement. Of course, I stayed under that 250 gallon per year. But it was awesome because I built basically a single tier 3-burner setup in my basement, which is where I really got to get creative and entered a lot of competitions and went further with my beer judging and BJCP stuff. And then from there, started kind of volunteering and helping out and being able to brew at some other breweries around town for fun. And then got a job working at Wicked Wort for a couple years, doing recipe development, doing some brewing there. And then from there, Andy and Dan and I started this whole venture, probably working on 3 years now. And then we eventually opened last October 18th. So my role is Chief Brewing Officer. So I oversee the beer production and that whole side of the world over there. Andy is the CEO, and then Dan is the CRO. So he's in charge of sales, marketing, branding, all the kind of front of house stuff.
What does R stand for in that?
What's that?
What's the R stand for in CRO?
Revenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's it been like? I know you're excited as hell to get this place open, and I was in a few times before I wasn't allowed to leave my house anymore. What's been the reception and the response, and how do you like going to work?
It's been great. I still have another full-time job I'm trying to juggle for now, but it's been fantastic. It's it's been, we kind of opened right before winter though, so winter's, we got through winter, and then as things just started to ramp up, then we hit this whole COVID thing, and now we have sort of had to pivot. The nice thing about that though is we've been able to do, kind of reinvent ourselves with the delivery and the curbside and getting crowlers into liquor stores, which we never intended. We always intended to put 4-packs into liquor stores, which we do have a canning line. We're working on getting that fired up, but for now, the crowlers are working great.
Yeah, that was a great setup you got when I picked up these beers. I mean, just go to the door, it's all packaged up with your name on it, it's already paid. I was like, wow, that was really nice.
Cool, thanks.
What's it been like kind of seeing that from the inside out, like the pivot that you're saying, and kind of what are the struggles that you're seeing some of your comrades kind of almost not be able to overcome so quickly?
Well, I think it's been good for us because we're small enough to be able to pivot. So we've sort of been able to keep basically all of our employees that don't already have another full-time job. So we're able to keep them working, and then they've been now doing everything from logistics to fulfilling orders to delivering beer to they have jobs. Right. And I think it helps the morale of being able to keep all of these people on. And we'll get back to where we kind of were, but it's going to be a new normal, of course.
Yeah. All right. Enough of the bad news. The good news is this beer. Tell us, does this beer have like homebrew roots even, or is this kind of a pro thing?
I've been brewing IPLs for probably 10 years. The funny thing is it's kind of actually a big thing in Canada.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know, for whatever reason, it hasn't really caught on here, but essentially this is more or less West Coast IPA with a lager yeast, if you want to look at it that simply. You know what I mean? So it's pretty simple recipe. You can see it's got a little bit more color than maybe your standard West Coast or whatever. The difference being we use standard 2-row for most of the malt, and then there's a little bit of Munich for color, and then we use a little bit of torrefied wheat, just a little bit for mouthfeel. Just to give it, a little bit of a little bit different kind of bite, a little bit different mouthfeel. Yeah, very dry, clean, crisp, clear. That's kind of the idea with this beer.
I mean, it came out very clear. I love the Columbus too. I mean, everybody's going new style hops, and it's good just to have one of those old C hops. Just bite you right in the tongue. Yeah,
we did an original version with Simcoe, and that was a little more, I would call it, fruity. Dan calls it dank and clementine, the original version, the Simcoe. But obviously the Columbus is just dank, kind of on top of dank, on top of dank.
I love
dankness.
The dankness.
Yeah.
It's a good 420 beer, man. It's on Monday.
Or 415. Y'all remember tax day? Remember the pre-virus tax day?
I got my COVID check today. That's my tax day today.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how they got my bank account routing number. I'm still a little kind of sketched out by that.
Did you not get direct deposit on your return?
Oh, I did.
Okay.
That's
I asked Elsa the same thing. I was like,
too.
how do they know? She was like, well, we're already in the system. So,
What the man giveth, they can also take away, right?
Right.
yeah. So let me ask you, when it comes to making an IPL versus an IPA, is there any consideration to the hops that you might use based on the fact that you are using this different yeast with different characters, or is it pretty much like 1-to-1, just go for it?
Well, I think the nice thing about at least what we've done so far with the 2 different versions is it really gives us a chance to showcase a single hop, because the beer itself is so clean and so crisp that you really understand what Columbus is and what Simcoe is. The next version might be something else, you know what I mean? We don't know yet, but I think it really gives us a good chance to keep kind of a simple grist, a simple like hop profile, and something that's just kind of that's got medium strength but still crushable. You know.
Is there any tips for homebrewers from your homebrew days of doing these that might be unique to this style?
I would say know how to brew a lager first, so temp control, right? That's the big thing. And if you're going to call it a lager, you can't ferment it at 68 degrees. So, make sure you do your diacetyl rest, make sure you have proper pitching rates, make sure that you're keeping the oxygen out of it when you're transferring, all those things. Just and be patient. Like any lager, you really want to give this probably a solid 6 weeks overall, even as a home brewer, just to let it cold condition and whatnot. Adding hops can be a little tricky because and Robbie can chime in if I'm wrong, but the idea is we're still adding the hops warm-ish, kind of at that diacetyl rest point, and then we're cold conditioning after we pull the hops, obviously after, say, 5 to 7 days. Yeah. So there is a period of time where between us dry hopping and where it's served, where your typical like hazy IPA is going to be fresh. You're dry hopping, you're pulling the hops, and then it's pretty much being drank.
Robbie, your dry hops are in that diacetyl phase versus any time during the cold?
Yeah, so as far as IPL goes, we dry hop after it passes diacetyl tests. And so I wanted to make sure we did it warm. If you dry hop cold, it can create, quite a different aroma kind of profile. I prefer dry hopping, 60-ish degrees. So yeah, we ferment, say it takes 10 days to fully ferment. We hit 64 degrees at the end of fermentation, past diacetyl. I'll dry hop it like we typically do. I'll give it like 4 to 5 days warm. And then once we hit that 4 to 5 days, I'll crash. And then after 3 days, I'll dump the hops at that point. And then give it another 48 hours, dump the hops again, just to make sure we're getting as much vegetation out of the tank as possible. And then we're set to lager for the few weeks that we do from there, without really having to worry about picking up any of those kind of grassy, undesirable kind of aromas from the hops that we're adding.
Wow, that's a lot of that carries through that long lagering, though. I would have thought that there's something I never knew. I thought there was hops in the lagering phase, or maybe like at the end of that, but that's amazing that much survives that cold rest.
It's a pretty big dry hop too. That's probably about a 4 pound per barrel dry hop.
It's gotta survive that long slumber.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
This is year round, or is this special one-off, or not one-off, obviously, but
right now, I would say, we're going to probably see how this one keeps going. I mean, obviously, everything's kind of changed with the pandemic as far as what we keep going versus what we may swap out with something else and maybe bring back at another time. So it all kind of depends. I mean, both versions of this beer have done very well. So it's also nice doing something different than maybe, just a standard lager or, you know, all the other sort of fun, I don't want to say beer bro stuff, but you know what I mean? This is a little bit off the beaten path.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like it.
There's not a lot of people doing an IPL.
No.
With Columbus.
Mhm.
Right.
I just looked at the ABV because I was like, I didn't eat much today. Maybe I should
Your diabetic ass is getting drunk.
I'm gonna get crunk tonight. I got 2 crawlers to drink. Yeah, buddy, 6.9%. Wait, was that on purpose? The 6.9?
I think so. I mean, yeah, it's within
Robbie?
realm. I think we're shooting for around 7, something like that.
Robbie.
So what would an Imperial pale lager be? Like 9 or 10%?
Sounds about right.
Malt liquor with
I
hot.
always have this discussion with. So I always have this discussion of the difference between like double and Imperial, and in my head, Imperial always means like 9+%, where double could mean like 7.5 to 9%. But I don't know if that's an official like rule. You know what I mean?
I was thinking of it as double digits.
I've always. Oh, really? I've always
How
just
I do
assumed.
it.
I've always just thought it meant. It's a syntax thing. It's either Imperial, India, Pale Ale, or you just say double I, which doesn't actually remove any syllables. It's like when you say NAACP. No one says the NAACP.
There you go.
Sorry. Whatever.
Is that just
So it's IPA.
That's a journalism nerd viewpoint on it. But yeah, people call it a double IPA so they don't have to say IIPA. Whatever. Woo! Beer's kicking in early today, folks.
Keep drinking, Chip. Keep drinking.
So, Tom, tell me about moving into a space that was already a brewery. Like, how much did that help you out, and what was that like? And did you have to battle any stigma of what was there before?
Yes, but less and less these days. You know, it was like it started out as the old Northgate spot, and now
Right.
it pretty much is not existent.
Right.
It was nice. Pro, we inherited a lot of equipment. Con, while we were doing construction, we had to move all kinds of shit back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I think, you know, none of us expected, including our general, James Lee, expected that we would have to move everything around 15 times because your standard brewery is just a blank slate, right? So we had all this extra crap. Some of it we sold, some of it we reused, some of it we just got rid of. We had to repipe a lot of things, redo a lot of things. Overall, obviously, it was worth it to be able to get in this space and inherit a lot of the equipment we did. Obviously, we added a lot of equipment and stuff too. Completely redid both tap rooms, or the front tap room, the new tap room is completely new. And then we added the offices upstairs, and you know, new cooler, centrifuge. So I mean, it's a new brewery for sure.
Has anybody ever showed up thinking that Northgate was still there?
Not at this point. I mean, I think we inherited the space almost 2 years ago at this point.
Right.
Oh.
So, you know.
I didn't realize that. Man, you've just been working on it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we had to make a commitment to get in here, and then that's kind of when the clock started ticking as far as getting our business plan together, name, you know, all the, what do we want to do? How do we want to lay this out? The architecture, the construction, you know, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I think even if we had all the money just in our pocket to do it, we'd still be opening a year and a half later. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
Just all the stuff that has to go into place, all the, you know, the inspections and the boring stuff that I don't want to get into.
Well, you mentioned the name. Talk about the name and that logo. Where does that name come from?
Yeah.
Well, we vetted like 100+ brewery names, and our lawyer was like, nope. So actually, that's when we kind of decided on, because it was tongue-in-cheek, it kind of fit our personality. It's like kind of fun, but yet like, I guess artsy, but kind of Also like kind of in the realm of the service industry with like the knife, I mean, we don't try to put the knife on everything, but it kind of falls into the sort of like knife has no handle, we're taking a risk, don't catch a falling knife by the handle, and then inevitably, we know we're going to take some cuts and bruises along the way, kind of thing.
That's cool.
Well, we should point out. Oh no, go Leaf.
So how do you decide to build your team? Like, we've got Robbie here with us, but I mean, you have some background. Like, how'd you build the team that you've got now?
Oh, Robbie's like the not so secret weapon for sure. I wanted to hire Robbie right off the bat, but obviously had to go through the whole interview process. And we hired Charles too, who's our other brewer, and he came from Sisyphus and Bauhaus, and he does a great job. I think we eventually were able to hire Robbie back in the summer. And then we were able to pretty much start brewing within a month or two after that, after we sort of straightened out a lot of the stuff that was in here. And Robbie was great. He kind of redesigned the brew house exactly how I wanted it. We put in like blending stations, repiped the chill, the heat exchanger, the way everything was working. Just able to kind of like upgrade everything and do it the right way, which is Robbie's way. And I'm glad we did it.
Damn straight.
Like Robbie's way.
It's like that Carlito's way.
That's right. Sounds like you need a shirt. Robbie's way.
Yeah.
It's silent.
Pop off somebody's head. Pop off somebody's head on it.
Yeah.
But I'll give them credit. For everything I had mentioned, like this needs to be done, that needs to be done, they didn't bat an eye. They just said yes, and got Tom's dad in there and helped sweat the copper, and like pretty much everything I'd asked for, they did, and it turns out in the beer.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, I luckily was lucky to be able to have a mechanical background, so anything Robbie was able to convey, it made sense in my head. At least whether I'm able to physically do it or not, at least we're on the same page and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, let's do that. Where I think a lot of maybe other brewery owners might be like, why would you do that? Doesn't make any sense to me. But like, I think we're able to talk about it, and it's like within 10 seconds, like, oh yeah, that's the way to do it.
Talk about that background, because you're still 40-hour-a-week job that you still have is in HVAC, right?
Yeah, HVAC, and actually work in a lot of other breweries. So it's kind of nice doing like glycol piping and steam piping and HVAC, bidding and estimating and running those projects. So it's, kind of works hand in hand and somewhat serendipitous as far as how that all worked out. So it's fun. Life is good. Other than not being able to like hug you guys.
Oh.
You're not a hugger, Brian. You've never been a hugger.
No.
Well, we're a half hour. One thing I wanted to ask Tom real quick, besides beer and HVAC, you're well steeped in the smoked meats.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man. You've got a smoker outside the brewery. You've got a smoker that's been pulled up to Brian's pig out. I don't know. Just want to riff on smoked meats for a minute.
I love it. And you guys know how much TLC goes into that. Like, went to Brian's party. Oh my God. There's like that smoker that was made out of a file cabinet blows my mind. Like each
Right.
is a different temperature. And it's amazing. But like, yeah, we all have these like sort of contraptions, and a lot of that equates to like brewing and home brewing and being able to work with what you have and design these systems that may have not even been intended to be what that's for. I mean, look at like kegel systems when it comes to home brewing, or a modified igloo cooler as a mash tun. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a lot of the same kind of ingenuity goes into it, and you make it work. And sometimes you get more comfortable with that than the fancy, like perfect smoker that, gets dragged behind a truck or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good
Robbie,
point.
what kind of stuff do you run into when you're brewing that you have to just kind of on the fly fix or change? There's got to be a ton.
Yeah, luckily less so at Falling Knife than in other breweries I've worked in the past, just because we're not we're not brewing around the clock, 24 hours and turning and burning. Stuff has, and will, it's a hot, humid, wet environment, stuff is bound to fail. And the funny thing is, like, when one thing goes, like, it all seems to go. It's never just one thing. So that's fun. So, anywhere from, like, turbidity sensor on our centrifuge to, crawler
Everly.
machine. Yeah. Our diometer. Luckily it's nothing. Actually, you know what? I'll take that back. There was one beer we were close to. One beer we were able to almost not lauder, but we're able to kind of like work around it and make it work. I won't go into the details. It was kind of a stupid mistake on my part, but luckily we're able to lauder through these kind of underlet spray arms underneath our false bottom that are meant, like, there's like 6 ports that spray in like a star pattern, and that's just supposed to help clear grain from underneath the false bottom. And worst case scenario, you can lauder through those too.
Brian, we're not the only one that have false bottom problems.
No. Oh no.
Or pump problems.
At least you can stir those by hand. This not so much.
Ooh, I can't imagine.
So Robbie, talk a little bit about your experience and where you're coming to Falling Knife from, and what have you been doing before Falling Knife?
Sure.
Can I suggest as Robbie gets started, we pour FWB. Just because.
Why? I'm still drinking beer.
Yep, those are all stickers too. Do you see the stickers?
Oh, dude, you're jumping the gun. But I brought 2 glasses, Brian. So
same here.
We're gonna be here for an hour and a half if we don't drink until we're done talking.
Uh-oh. You're not talking to a rookie here.
Start.
That's an awfully small glass. So yeah,
Jeez.
Robbie.
Stop interrupting Robbie. Let him talk. Shit.
As we pour this pink juice, Robbie, school us real quick.
Been brewing professionally for about 7 years now. Started out at Flat Earth Brewing Company. That was the first brewery I worked at. Kind of got the home brewing bug from my wife's cousin, actually, up in Superior, Wisconsin. I'm a Bulldog. Went to UMD. Brewed a couple batches with my wife's cousin. Kind of got the itch from there. Graduated college and then kind of decided that was kind of what I wanted to do. I worked at Elevated Beer, Wine, and Spirits, just kind of getting to know kind of craft beer. And then pretty quickly after starting at Elevated, I had been going to homebrew over in St. Paul and started going to Northern Brewer and started to get to know those guys at Northern Brewer and just really liked the vibe that they had there, and just really enjoyed the guys there. And so I applied and ended up getting a job at Northern Brewer St. Paul, splitting my time between Northern Brewer St. Paul and then Minneapolis, waiting for a full-time position to open up at St. Paul. And pretty quickly after splitting between the 2 stores, got a full-time job at Northern Brewer St. Paul, and then worked there for about a year and kind of decided I want to go pro and kind of make this, a career. So I signed up for the Siebel online concise course, and that is like the kind of the base course to start. If you want to take the intermediate, more advanced courses, you have to take the online, or you have to take the concise course first. You can either do it online or in Chicago. So I did it online while I was working at Northern Brewer STP, and then kind of used Northern Brewer as a kind of a gateway, because various head brewers, craft brewers would come in periodically for ingredients here and there, and so just kind of use that as a way to kind of get my foot in the door and meet some people, just kind of see if they needed some help in the brewery. And then I was able to get a job lined up. They were looking for a brewer over at Flat Earth, and I had met Bob through Northern Brewer STP and told him when I got back from Chicago doing the at the time it's called the Associates Program. I think it's like the Advanced Brewing course. They changed the name since then. But after the 8 weeks I spent in Chicago, had the job lined up. So as soon as I got back, started over at Flat Earth, and then worked there for like 6 to 8 months, and applied over at Surly, and ended up getting a position over at BC as brewer kind of right out of the gate, and then was there for just under 5 years. Had a kid kind of towards the end of my stay at Surly, and was kind of looking for some more stable hours, and Fair State was hiring, and they don't brew around the clock like Surly does, so I was able to find a position over at the Midway location, the production brewery over at Fair State. So it's very similar to like what I was used to with over at Surly, being a 30 barrel brew house, a production brewery, but just not brewing quite as much. So it was a little bit more convenient for kind of the family and the home life. But I was excited to get some new opportunities over at Fair State, and brew some new beers, and kind of just expand my brewer's knowledge. They're fantastic with their lagers, and I was looking forward to bring some more of those, and their IPAs are fantastic, and pretty much everything they do is amazing. So it's very much an exciting moment to go work over there for a little bit, and then saw the position over at Falling Knife, and I thought about applying, and then Tom messaged me one day, and it's like, hey man, he's like I got a listing that you should take a look at. I got a job that I think you'd be good for. And so he reached out, and I think I sent a resume like that day, and kind of got the ball rolling from there. And then, it's nice being a brewer and, working at Fair State and Surly, but, I was kind of looking to, kind of grow, as a brewer, and, learn more, and kind of not necessarily just be the shift brewer, and, looking to, do some recipe development, kind of more of the behind the scenes, aspects of the job, and kind of, as a whole, perform all those tasks. And it's been great ever since. So super stoked to be here with those guys, and so far super happy with the beers you've been making. It's been a lot of fun.
So, I mean, there's people that are fans of Chop Brew that know that we've got some Surly boys in the house, and we got some Fair State boys in the house. I'm one of them. Chuck's another. Like, talk about working under Todd at one point, and then moving over to Nico. Like, these are guys that know what the heck is going on. Like, talk about what you learned from Todd and Nico, and some real, like, damn good brewers.
Yeah, it was kind of a trial by fire as far as Surly goes. Like, they're just kind of no F's given. Just kind of, I was kind of hired on as a brewer right away, and typically, you start at, packaging or in the cellar, kind of work your way up, and just kind of fell into the brewer's position right away, based on the fact that they opened that new brewery, that large one, at MSP. And so they had kind of segued their brewers, their veteran brewers, over to the new facility, and we're kind of looking to, hire, brewers to fill those positions. So I was kind of thrown to the wolves kind of right away. I kind of skipped all the cellar, I was brewing before I knew how to like clean a tank, kind of, was able to bypass all that stuff just by circumstance, just as far as the positions that they had filled at that time. I originally had applied for a cellarman and a brewer position, thinking it was more qualified for the cellarman position. But yeah, they're just like, you're brewing, like the utmost confidence that, you are, trained and well enough, the training was pretty in depth. I went through, I had 3 brewer shifts, and I went through all of those a couple of times. And then it was just kind of like, go for it. We're going to put you in an overnight shift. You're there by yourself, for, around 6 to 8 hours. Like, literally, like the motto was "Don't fuck it up." That's that's kind of how they were. And I as much as it was, intimidating, like, it definitely made me a better brewer, where it was just like, you got to be able to problem solve. You got to be able to kind of figure it out on the fly, especially when you're, brewing, 24 to 30 turns in a week. Like, that's, a lot of beer. So I got really good at multitasking, being at, 4 or 5 different things going on at the same time. But I guess the thing I learned, the most was just having the confidence and, the ability to believe in the training, and then just kind of go, and I really did appreciate that, in the stance that like the opposite would being like, holding your hand through every step of the way. They were very much just hands off, and just kind of believing in your ability, which is really cool to see. And then a Fair State, just seeing all the, the processes. The main difference for me between the two breweries is the fact that they have a 4-vessel system instead of a 3-vessel system. So at Fair State, they had a mash mixer, which we did not at Surly. So at Surly, we're doing just single infusion mashes at BC because it's not a jacketed mash slaughter tun. Whereas Fair State, we have a jacketed mash mixer. So that's what we're mashing into, and we're able to do step mashes, which I had done home brewing but never done professionally. So it was awesome. That 4th vessel not only allows you to start a beer sooner than you normally would with a 3-vessel, because as soon as you clear a vessel, you can you have ability to move a mash or move wort or boil or what, et cetera, et cetera. But to see the attention to detail that Nico had created with all the recipes over at Fair State. I think my favorite day over at Fair State was the day we were doing the Hefeweizen, and we were also doing Crankin' Foamers. So Crankin' Foamers was
my favorite beer ever.
It's a cereal mash. I actually brewed most of that, actually. So it's a cereal mash, which I'd never done before. Plus the Hefeweizen is like an 8-step or 6-step mash, double mash, 6 or 8 steps in it as a whole.
Wow.
So I think each turns, there was 3 turns in that day, was what would typically take maybe an hour and a half was like twice that. And so just the timing, having to figure out, being in a shift brewer position, if I'm the morning brewer, the ideal thing is to make sure that I don't slow the day down, so the anchor of the day is stuck there later. So that's kind of my personal goal as a brewer, is to make sure that like I'm staying on course and on time, so I can get that last person out of the building at the end of the day, so they can go home at 9 instead of 11 at night. And so I was able to kind of do that pretty well with that day. But yeah, the Crankin' Foamers was my first cereal mash. That was kind of fun to do that for the first time, using corn grits, and basically kind of making, polenta out of the corn, and then cooling it down with your mash, your strike water, to then dough in the rest of the barley on top of that, to hit that specific temperature you were looking for, all the while doing the Hefeweizen, which, we went through all the, protein, beta, alpha, all those rests on top of it too. Was, a bit of a trying day, but we were able to nail it all, and both of those beers turned out awesome. And, that's part of the thing that made me like most excited about the brewing there, was just the intricacies of, all the brewing processes and steps. And, I'd never brewed seltzer before too. And so I was kind of the one that kind of created the process for doing that, and was able to kind of maximize and be, as most efficient with it. And I think at one point I had like 4 different turns of seltzer going all at the same time.
Wow.
Just to make the day go that much quicker. And so, yeah, I just really enjoy, as far as brewer, just, the logistics of it, trying to make things more efficient, more, processes, how to make the day shorter. And, in the life of a shift brewer, big production brewer, any minute, any, hour saved exponentially, grows throughout the week, especially when you're doing, around the clock brewing. So any way I could be more efficient in my process, or ways to, make it easier for myself or somebody else, that was kind of the really exciting part for me.
Well, and I've been watching Tom this whole time. Like, Tom's sitting there like a proud papa right now. Like, I hired the goddamn right brewer to open my brewery with, because he's like sitting here smiling, he's nodding. Like, if you're gonna open a brewery, like, this guy knows what he's going. I mean, you can't come out at Surly and Fair State, and then, I mean, Nice job, Tom. Like, you're going to jump off on the right foot if this is what you're doing.
And I'm not going to take offense to, like, what did Todd and what did Nico teach Robbie. I look at it from a perspective of, like, I know what I know. I think I'm a good brewer, but I'm not Robbie. I'm not a production brewer, and I need to hire a production brewer that's a head brewer that can run the brewery. You know what I mean?
Right.
That way I can look at the bigger picture stuff, like getting the canning line running, like projections, like what do we need to brew, ingredients, like long-term, whatever. That's my job. I'm not trying to, I think, I don't mean this to sound the wrong way with other breweries, but I think sometimes people get out of their comfort zone or experience zone and try to take on all of these things that they've either never done or aren't necessarily good at, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a no-brainer to hire Robbie because he's the man and he makes the beer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't need to be
I'm the
that
man,
guy.
and I make the beer.
Well,
And I want to be home
saying?
when I said I'm going to be home. So don't screw me up, morning shift brewer.
Well, it's all about the end product. Like, it doesn't matter how we get there. I don't need to, like, say that I mashed in every beer or mashed out every beer. It doesn't matter to me. It's that it gets done right by the right people. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's stepping back and saying, I don't have an ego. Like, I'm going to make this work because I want to make it work. And this is a good brewery. We're going to make it a good brewery. But there's places that step up and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it my way. And it's going to be my ego that gets fed.
Right. And, at the same point, too, I also want to make sure Robbie has a creative input on everything that we do. We were just talking about today. Like, we just, we want to make the best thing that we possibly can, and however we accomplish that, then that's great. It's not about, well, this is my recipe and we need to make this. It's like, hey, Robbie, you got a great hazy recipe. Like, let's use that. You know what I mean? Like, and I think our hazies are on point, just as an example.
Let's talk about this creative input. What are we drinking, Robbie?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about how it got into all of our hands.
Yeah, so this is FWB, so it stands for filled with berries.
It stands for whatever you want it to stand for.
And that's, the tongue-in-cheek part is, it could mean friends with benefits.
Oh.
It could mean, there could be numerous names. So he kind of left it as an open book there, but the idea was, filled with berries and kind of play on the word there. But we're looking at, it's been a while since I've had this, 5% fruited kettle sour. So this is kettle sour with just standard kind of 2-row. We use some, just pulling up the recipe here. Use some 2-row. I believe we use some white wheat in this beer, just kind of give it a little bit more complexity, a little bit more kind of depth and body. Threw in some, some carapils, carafoam, just to try to give it some more lacing and head retention. Not a ton of hops in this one. We're looking for kind of right around the let's see here, right around 20 IBUs. Essentially, for this one, we kind of did it as far as our hazies go, where we like to rely a lot on the Whirlpool hop addition for like kind of aroma and bitterness, to kind of round out and keep that bitterness kind of low. So there was no boil hops in this one. This is just purely a Whirlpool hop addition. What's up, Peter? So just a pretty neutral, kind of no frills base malt recipe, and we wanted to make sure that we let the fruit kind of do the talking with this one. So this was the second kettle sour we had done. First one being cumulonimbus, so I was a little bit more familiar with the process. It was kind of not as easy of a process to do kettle sours at our brewery as what I was compared to over at Fair State, with kind of the brew house. So we have, 2-vessel system. So the idea is we sour in the kettle, at being called the kettle sour. So once I finish lautering, I just give it a quick twist. Have been boiled off. There's no, wild yeast or bacteria present, just to make sure I pasteurize the wort ahead of time. We use Lactobacillus plantarum for this beer to do the kettle souring overnight. So once I finish boil, knock it down to roughly around 100 degrees before I pitch the lacto. And then, we pitched the lacto and gave it an overnight souring portion. Just kind of sealed up the manway as best as we could. Try to trickle some CO2 at a super slow rate overnight, just to make sure we weren't picking up any oxygen that kind of deters the acidification overnight. And the process worked really well. So we, roughly kind of shoot for, a pH of like 3.2-ish. We're not looking for something super kind of enamel ripping, like super tart. We like the approachable aspect of it. I find that personally, if I have a really acidic beer, after, half of the beer, it's just, I'm kind of getting a little like, acid buildup in the stomach, and it just kind of is not so much a pleasant experience. So I personally like the more restrained sour, like still like it's a sour, no doubt. It's got that acidity, kind of a nice, well-rounded. So then once we get to that certain pH that we're looking for, if we weren't quite at that rate, we would just seal it back up and give it a couple more hours, let it do its thing. But luckily this Lactobacillus plantarum acidifies really quickly and pretty much overnight. And by that point, we're kind of off to the races. So pretend like you're just boiling the wort. Same thing. We do anywhere from a 30 to 60 minute boil, depending on your personal preference. I think with this one we did an hour. And then did our whirlpool hops knocked out like we normally would. We used kind of the California Ale US05 001, just a neutral California Ale yeast. Fermented it, 68 degrees, kind of as we normally would. And then with this one, with most of our sours, we use Oregon fruit puree. It's just the easiest as far as the fact that it's aseptic. It's, super user-friendly, brewer-friendly. It comes in a 42-pound box. And then with this one, the idea was to make like a super jammy, berry forward, kind of over the top kettle sour. So we used raspberries, we used boysenberries, and we used blackberries. I'm a huge raspberry fan, so I wanted that to be kind of the star of the show, and then the boysenberry and blackberry being kind of more supporting. So I believe this is 1 pound of fruit per gallon of beer. So we try to go pretty aggressive with the fruit.
1 pound per gallon?
So yeah, the old homebrew, tried and true, 1 pound per gallon. That, a lot of those professional breweries are actually kind of following that same kind of formula. So yeah, we're looking at
a gallon is a reference to the can versus true fruit.
Gallon of beer,
gallon
like in
beer.
the tank.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
A pound per gallon.
So yeah,
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Gallon
is the pound real fruit? You said it's Oregon. It's the puree.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it comes
they
in
measure
42
in pounds.
Yeah. That's what I said. Why is everybody correcting me?
Because you always talking about gallons of beer.
No, I just asked. I don't know what a can weigh. What does one of those typical cans weigh?
They come in a cardboard box, and it's 42 pounds. So it's
you be getting boxes. Okay.
It's 4.8 gallons.
That part.
Hold on, I'll be right back. I'm gonna grab one. I'll show you what it looks like.
Yeah, BRB, show me your cans, Tom.
He said 42-pound box, Chip.
Yeah.
Well, a box, right?
2-pound box.
Kind of like you would get almost like Coke extract. Like once you grow beyond home brewing, you're not getting a screw-off can anymore.
It's like it's a plastic bag inside of a cardboard box.
Like wine must.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. Your wine kits, instead of that being wine must, that's your raspberry, your boysenberry, your blackberry. That's exactly what it is.
So I'm going to rely on Chip to do some editing at this point and throw in a weird question, because Chip could edit it and put it to the back of the video or earlier in the video. So you come out of St. Paul the St. Paul Northern Brewer, and we talk about the same, the crew and who we got in Chop and Brew. So tell me about working with Chuck Gosnell. Tell me about that. Tell me about Chuck Gosnell.
Wow.
Look at that box, boy.
Look at that.
Yeah, there you go.
That's 42 pounds of fruited puree.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That cleanup's got to be
nice. Mango.
Oh. Mango. Yeah. All right, Robbie, Chuck. Working with Chuck in 1 minute.
Northern Brewer St. Paul was one of the probably the most fun I've ever had on a job I think I've ever had. Working with Chuck, working with Micah and Patrick over at Northern Brewer St. Paul.
Oh, my God. Micah and Patrick. I can't believe that's your era. That's like the era
I would. Snap. He's got the old shoe.
Yeah. I bought this from you when I worked there.
Micah and Patrick, dude.
Yeah, so it was like, it was kind of the weird time to be working at Northern Brewer, like as far as like kind of the whole transition. It was cool to be able to work with those guys. They were there kind of back in the heyday. So, I was able to hear all the fun stories and kind of shenanigans that went on. And so they kind of like carried that torch, at the store. And I really was, appreciative of the fact that I kind of got to enjoy, kind of what Northern Brewery, was. And, we had a great time. Chuck, it was awesome. Like I worked, basically I took over John Eager's position. John Eager went to, he went over.
Not Indeed. Before Indeed.
No, Lino. What's that?
Hammerheart.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I filled in his position when he left to go work at Hammerheart. So I took his full-time gig over there. And, Chuck is awesome. They're just, everyone that was working there was just super nice, and we just had such a good time. I mean, on weekends, like working Saturdays, I look forward to it, like I'm sure times have changed since then, but like, beer to be drinking and food to be eating and helping customers answering questions and taking phone calls and, brewing out back and picking, I'd say the affinity of where I liked brewing with raspberries came from Northern Brewer St. Paul with the raspberry bushes they had behind the garage out back. If we had some slow times, I'd just be out there picking raspberries and just bringing them home and using them for making some beer. But all those guys were there were just a ton of fun. I just had a blast there. And so, those guys are awesome, and I miss them dearly, and was able to see Chuck for the first time in a few years. He'd stopped by Falling Knife with the family and the kiddo, and got to see them. And it probably had been since we'd worked together over at Northern Brewer, and it was good to see him.
Damn. Well, tell us about what you're tasting. Like for people that are watching or jealous, like what are we tasting here?
Yeah, so we're getting some nice berry notes. We're looking at probably about 50% raspberry, 25% boysenberry, and 25% blackberry. So raspberry is the star of the show. And then we have the boysenberry and blackberry kind of coming in behind. I wanted it kind of be more nuanced and not necessarily just be like 100% raspberry forward. Plus you get the color from the boysenberry and the blackberry, then being slightly darker than the raspberry puree we get. Not aggressive or, abrasive, abrasive acidity, but you're getting some just like nice acidic notes, fairly clean. and actually pretty dry.
Yeah.
This did it the way I like to add my fruit during the souring and kind of the overall process is I don't add the fruit to the bright tank. I like to ensure that the fruit, if it is going to re-ferment, it does it in the fermenter, but I'm not looking to completely ferment the fruit. So what I essentially do is I'll add it basically at the tail end of fermentation. So say like maybe a week later, you hit terminal, I'll add all of the fruit at that point, and then give it 3, 4 days, 5 days, just any additional time, just in case it does want to re-ferment, that it has the opportunity to do so, just to make sure that kind of gets it out of its system before we put it in package, because obviously you don't want that to happen in a keg. So yeah, I added it all directly to the fermenter, 4 or 5 days, just to sit, and then add the centrifuge, so I'm able to pretty easily separate the beer and make it as hazy or clear as I'd like before we put it in keg.
What's a boysenberry on its own? I don't know. I've heard it, but is it small like a currant, or is it big like a blueberry or raspberry?
It's got like a more of a maroon kind of color, kind of a deep maroon.
Okay. More like a blackberry, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
I remember having like boysenberry syrup on my pancakes as a kid. It was delicious.
Yeah.
Tom was talking about Canada. I think boysenberries are a Canadian thing, right, Tom?
Canadian, yeah, basically. I mean, I think they're more further northern, like where we are. Yeah. One other nice thing I was going to say that I get from this beer is you get a lot of the, at least a little bit of the white wheat kind of cereal character of the malt. So it's not just a fruit bomb. Yeah. It is a beer.
Yeah.
Which I like about this. It's, some of them are just like, they coat the side of the glass so bad, just like you're drinking just fruit puree, where this is actually still, under that beer category.
Right. It's not a beer smoothie. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and those are more and more popular, and nothing against those, but
to each their own.
To each their own. There you go.
It's delicious.
I love it. What do you got next, Chip?
I'm almost out of beer. I might be.
You talked about picking berries at Northern Brewer, and I know from having some berries and going to get some and doing beers, like, talk a little bit about the difference between a whole berry kind of secondary experience versus what Papa Tom's big box of juice.
Sure.
Just say you've been picking berries for years trying to get one of these boxes.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm. It makes it so much easier.
If someone's got a backyard plot or can get to like a you pick it kind of farm, like where do you suggest some of those solid elements go into a beer like this?
In what proportion?
Yeah, I guess if it's a gallon per barrel. If puree, what does that mean with whole fruit?
So like Fair State, they would do you pick, and so when I was there, that went into a mixed culture fermentation beer. So there's a couple options with the whole fruit. Either it's added directly to a barrel filled with mixed culture fermentation beer, or it's transferred into a stainless vessel. Fruit is added to that. And either it can be bagged. Otherwise, if you macerate the fruit ahead of time, that's also a possibility to make it more user-friendly. The nice thing about the aseptic fruit puree from Oregon is that there's no seeds, there's no solids, so it's much easier to work with.
There's no bugs, there's no bacteria.
Sure. Yep. It's been, I think, freeze, either frozen or heated. I can't remember which one they do.
Pasteurized, right?
So like while you're getting more flavor and you're retaining more of those aromatics with the whole fruit, there's a lot less, worry that comes with it. But at Fair State, they would do the U pick where they'd have all their, whoever members volunteer to come out and pick whichever fruit they wanted. I believe when I worked there, it was raspberries. And I believe it was added to the barrel, but maybe not quote me on that one. And then typically, like with barrels, if you're transferring from barrel to a tank, you can get these like metal, like bazooka screens. Comes in an enclosure, and there is a screen, and it depends on how fine or coarse you want it, like a tube on the inside of that. And so that allows liquid to travel through the filter, kind of, and then holding and containing the fruit inside of that filter housing. And obviously, it saturates to a certain point, and you have to kind of take it apart, clean it out, and do it again. But that could be one way to kind of filter out the more whole aspects of the fruit that come with it.
I forgot how many places you've worked, Robbie.
You want to hear a funny story?
Yeah, I do.
Robbie and I first crossed paths at Flat Earth. So Bob and I, the head brewer, went to high school together. So he was kind of letting me brew with him at the time where I was first starting to get my kind of commercial chops. And Robbie had just got hired there out of Siebel. And that's where he and I kind of first crossed paths. Yeah, that's funny. So
yeah, I remember as you were telling all the stories, I was like, I think I run across you like every year and a half. And there for a while, it was just like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, you don't work in Northern Brewery, you're going to school? And then the next time I was like, what? I was like, and then I guess it was State Fair last year.
Yep.
Ran across you. I was like, what the fuck's going on? You're like, I'm opening that brewery with Tom. And I was like, what? I thought you okay.
Welcome to a startup, poor Robbie. He's like, open a brewery, they said. It'd be fun, they said.
Yeah.
Book a pig, they said. Get a trailer from Tom, they said.
Yeah, buy a whole ass pig. One thing I do want to point out, and Tom called this out earlier. So one crowler doesn't have it. I don't know if you're out of these labels, but these dudes are delivering crowlers that are not only filled with amazing beer, but if you peel the label away,
what the hell?
Now you've got these peel-off stickers, which I now have like on all of my coffee containers downstairs.
What? No.
Well, we ran out of some of the sticker labels, so they might not all have them, but we're getting back to them.
I got it.
Hey, it's like when you get the sucker label with the little star on it, man.
You're like Willy Wonka. I didn't get it.
Look at all that shit left in my can. That's awesome.
Some have them, some don't. That was kind of that was a product of the whole transition to, being the 100% crowler sales. We had to order a bunch more because we went through them that much quicker.
Oh, shit.
So tell the people, I mean, depending on what our reality is moving forward, 16-ounce cans, canning line, what does that kind of look and feel like?
Well, I think like we're going to be transitioning to the canning line, but I really just kind of like a lot of the other stuff we ran into here. I really want to get Wild Goose to come in and sort of recommission the equipment just to make sure all the sensors are working, everything is good. We actually had that scheduled for about a week from now, and then of course the travel bans and all this stuff is happening. So right now we plan on just crowlering for now until this kind of all passes, and we can get them out here and do a proper recommissioning on the canning line. We did add some kind of fun accessories on there. So instead of a twist rinse, we're using an ionized air rinse, which basically blows all the dust particles and everything out. Because apparently what can happen is the water particles can hold oxygen in and add to your TPO or your total package oxygen in the can. So we're doing that, and then it comes in and we have a exact basically purge indicator that shows that we added that shows exactly what pressure to purge or what volume to purge at for how long. So we're not over purging the cans, because what can happen as a home brewer even, not a lot of homebrewers are filling cans, but even with bottles, if you over purge a can, it'll blast that CO2 out and reintroduce oxygen in it. So you want to fill kind of gently from the bottom, and it'll expel that oxygen from the bottom out, right?
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Makes sense.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, what he said.
The guy that owns a
So,
brewery,
and then
I'm gonna take his advice.
And then we added another little kind of fun gadget onto it, which is they call it Dio Buster, right, Bobby or Robbie?
Yep.
Dio Buster, which the can runs through, and then there's a foam comb on it. So it's basically like a cover between the fill and the top of the can. So not only does it like chop off that top layer of foam, but then it keeps everything sort of in this suspended CO2. So the whole goal of any canning operation is keeping oxygen out of the packaging. That's what we're trying to do right now. So even with the the crawler machine, it's all about how we purge the cans and how long they last and whatever. But we want to be able to have as long shelf life on these cans as we possibly can. And I don't want to put cans out in the market that are unstable. Just kind of the basic premise of the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's been about an hour. It's a long episode.
Has it really been an hour?
Are we boring you, Chip? Sorry.
No, I mean, we can keep going. I'm just trying to think of who's going to watch it.
Closing remarks?
Sure people are going to watch.
Yeah,
everybody sum up your last month in 3 words.
Your last one.
Shelter in place.
I drink alone. That's my last month.
I drink alone.
Who's saying that song? George Thorogood. I drink alone.
What?
Well, I know Chip is going to pick this up as soon as we're done. This just came out today. It's a collab we did with Black Stack called Chop Chop, which kind of makes sense. Funny, right?
Chop
Chop.
What's the name reference? With
well, they came up with it. I think it's a falling knife kind of.
You gotta do it quickly. Oh, chop chop.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was because you're like, we got to turn this around really quick for the people.
Well, so we brewed it at their place 3-ish weeks ago, right, Robbie? Something like that. And then we were going to do one the next week here that was like our home to their away. And then the whole thing, the whole virus thing happened, and we basically had to postpone the whole thing. So when things get back to new normal, we're going to do our version of it here. But so far, this thing's tasting great. So
nice.
I guess it's a plug. I don't know.
Yeah,
so
plug it.
I got to go to a post. Yeah, go for it, Robbie.
I was saying 6.6 hazy IPA with.
Oh shit.
We use Golden Promise spelt malt, and then some Pilsner malt, and then it's they use Citra, Sabro Cryo, and a little bit of Idaho 7.
Dude, of course they did. They love that Sabro.
What is your version going to be, Robbie?
I love that Sabro.
Dude, the Sabro is awesome, and but Black Stack loves that Sabro block.
Yeah,
coconut, right?
So when you do the home and home, what's the Falling Knife hop lineup?
Yeah, that is a good question.
Well, when we were going to do our version, it was going to be, the idea was we both do Citra and Sabro, Citra being my favorite hop, Sabro being Murph's favorite hop. And then we were going to do a little bit of differentiation in the two, just so got to try both so they're not the same recipe. My plan was to do Strata and maybe some Equinaut, and then they went with the Idaho 7 route. So there was going to be some play on the hops there. Because the idea is if you create the same recipe and do 2 different places, people are not necessarily want to try one at both. So we wanted to have some sort of differentiation between the two. So you want to try both. Mm-hmm. And the other cool thing with that collab that we were going to kind of exemplify is they do more of the biotransformation as far as their dry hopping technique goes. And we do more post, fermentation or towards the end of fermentation. So we get some of that biotransformation, but because we're a production brewery, we need to be able to harvest that yeast and, utilize it for future brews. And if we're doing the whole biotransformation, you can't necessarily harvest yeast after you've dry hopped it. It's not, ideal situation there. And so that was going to be kind of the play on the two. was the idea, at least.
Biotransformation insinuates like it's going in during fermentation at some point, maybe at the top,
Active,
middle, or bottom.
Active.
Whereas you're
Day
saying you
3.
separate it to dry hop it. That way your yeast is safe.
We don't. What we typically do is we wait for most of fermentation to cease to allow the yeast to flocculate out. And once the yeast flocculates out, we can harvest a nice, thick.
That's what I mean. I didn't mean like a
dense
separator.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Gotcha, sure.
I just
you
meant
can do
pulling
that
it
too,
off
but,
before you throw the hops in.
Yep. So we still have a little bit of like active fermentation, but mostly it's, subsided. And so we're able to get more of like a thick slurry for a subsequent brew. Whereas Black Stack, they do the whole biotransformation every brew, and that's kind of a part of their house flavor.
Well, another differential like between us and them is like we run everything through the centrifuge too. So they let everything kind of settle out, where we have the luxury of being able to run everything through the centrifuge. So there's no, I guess, particulate per se in our beer.
Or less.
Or less. And there's going to be particulate in any hazy IPA.
Yep.
I'm not saying this beer from Black Stack does. It just, they let it settle out or cold crash as long as they can. I don't think they're finding it.
I would like to point out that earlier when Brian said, or Leaf or Brian said that this was clear, I held up an example that looked very unclear because it's been in my freezing cold garage all day.
And
That
your
IPL
glasses
is fucking bell ringing clear right there. Wow. Beautiful.
That's the German lager yeast.
And I do like that color too.
Center
Like you said, you throw a little malt in there to give it like a little bit of
leave.
bones on it.
Slow down, player. Hey, Tom and Robbie, what do you miss about home brewing now that you're pro brewing?
Ooh. What do I miss going down to my basement to look in the closet downstairs and actually see the fermentation happening. Now it's just in a stainless tank. I can't see anything.
Yeah.
I miss it being a party. I get the stereo going and like and whatever, but because it didn't matter. I mean, it did matter, but it wasn't like we'd have to dump, $2,000 worth of beer if we screwed something up.
Right, Brian Adams? Right, Brian Adams?
That's right.
It's like we're in the basement. You don't matter.
Yeah.
Badass brewery.
That's right. You miss your numbers? Oh, well. We got meat outside roasting.
Roasting.
Exactly. It was the fun. It was the
Got a crock
yeah.
pot?
It was the social aspect of it is what I guess
Yeah.
I'll tell you
I mean,
what,
it's
I'm
so
missing
fun
the
to come.
social.
It's so fun to come in and smell the grain and smell the wort and like
love that when I come
check
in.
everything out and be like
Mm-hmm.
all the
I always
process
love
stuff
that
is
when
still fun. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that when you come in the brewery and you're like, oh, they're brewing. I wonder what that is, and you try to pick out
especially
those aromas.
stouts, man.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
Well, I was
You
gonna
want
say
to run in
that's
the
the same.
back.
You kind of get that same thing though at a brewery. I mean, I don't know how many shifts you're running, but like, I used to come in at 8:00 at Summit for like a computer job, and I would still be like, they are totally brewing oatmeal stout right now. EPA had its own smell, Horizon, Pilsner, but on oatmeal stout days, I was just like, I should have had breakfast. Now all I want is like oatmeal with chocolate chips in it.
Right.
Sterling
you want to
Bender.
get a hot scotchy is what you want.
You get
Hot
Chip
scotch.
over there at 11 a.m. like grabbing handfuls of spent grain.
Sterling Bender was always my favorite as far as the aromatics of mashing in.
Yeah.
One of the-
that was so awesome.
One of the brewers used to bring a jar of dried fruit and honey, and he would take some of the oats, flaked oats that he would be adding to the bender and put it in his jar and mix it with some hot water, and he'd have oatmeal as he's mashing in a bender, coffee bender.
Oh,
Like a
wow.
You brought up
Brewer's
hot
breakfast.
scotchies. Does everybody know what hot scotchies are?
Oh, if you don't, you need to know.
I mean,
I've been doing it for years.
somebody explain it.
Hot
It's the
scotchy
first
is
row. It's
taking
the first,
that hot wort and mixing it with some good scotch.
and
Yep.
specifically
While
the
you're
first
brewing.
runnings. Like
Yep.
It's supposed to be the first runnings, although none of us remember it till like midway through
Right?
Sparge. We're like, oh. But when Dawson does it, it's like once it's clear and he knows that it's working, it's the first like 8 ounces out of that freaking
Like
mash done.
you throw the alcohol on the first runnings and like the little bit of alcohol with the first runnings, and that's what the beer is going to taste like. It should be accurate.
Yeah, and the warmth, it just kind of like enough of the booze evaporates.
Oh,
but
yeah.
enough of it stays in, and
Well, and the literal warmth too from like the hot work.
Yeah.
So we brewed before we even we're close to opening. Back Channel was super cool about us doing a collab with them. So we did 2 different beers there. And I was like, have you guys ever done a hot scotch? And they're like, what?
What?
So, luckily, there's a liquor store across the parking lot from them. So I grab a bottle of scotch, come over.
In Duluth, it was open at 5:30 in the morning.
No, not Duluth.
Luckily, it was like 11 o'clock. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm thinking of
oh my God. So I poured them hot scotches, and like all of their minds were doing this. Like they'd never seen it, never heard of it. So I'm proud to be the guy that taught Back Channel hot scotches.
And you get pissed when you forget about it. You're like, damn it. Missed the hot scotch.
All right, everybody. So raise a glass to your local brewery. In this case, Falling Knife, who's delivering those beers to the back porch. Tip your driver. Robbie, Tom, this is really awesome. Thanks for the home brewing tips. Thanks for the pro brewing tips. Which I'll say, chop for chop, brew for brew.
Brew for brew.
Brew for brew.
Brew for brew.
Thanks for having us. Cheers, boys.
Let it. Peace out.
Peace.
I'm lit.
This
I'm
guy.
getting there.
I got the new Zoom, by the way, so I can actually see everything.
Crawlers up.
Download thing.
Which one are we doing here?
Neon Midnight.
Okay.
Oh, I'm spilling. That's why I brought a towel.
Good idea. I didn't bring anything.
Rookie. Look at that.
Look at this.
Really?
Well, that's pretty good, Brian. I don't know. I have a hard time pouring that first pour out of a crawler without getting just a little bit of a little dribble. Robbie knows what's up. Okay.
Because you're too anxious.
Or backwards. That's how you start, right?
There you go.
Upside down, yep.
Where y'all at? 1, 2, 3.
Cheers.
Woo! Welcome to the future. All right, we can hang out, but I'm going to stop recording. So real quick,
All right,
I'm going to do a wrap up real quick.
I gotta go pee.
I do too. God.
Like before we do the wrap up.
Chip left. God damn it, Leaf. Don't leave yet. You dummy.
He's really got to pee.
This is how we make a blooper reel for a Zoom video.
Emergency.
Hey, I've seen that bedroom before.
You've seen the ceiling in that bedroom, right?
Oh, damn.